Okay, here we go. We are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and on today's video review, I am going to tackle every single card in the Defenders expansion for Versus 2 PCG. Now, I will be reviewing these cards both from the perspective of how they play in the overall makeup of the meta, card combos that are available outside of just this box, but I do also want to pay some amount of attention to the Battles Royale format, which we have coming up here soon, in which Defenders is one of the sets that you could choose from. So I want to look at these cards both just within the silo of being played with other cards within the same box, but also kind of more broadly, and we'll see how this set stacks up. First, we're going to dive right in here with main characters. We're going to start with Bullseye. Bullseye main character. Now, this guy... oh, man. So, he's a 3/4/5 with range. Now, that's slightly better than the 2/4/5, which is basically the worst widely available stats in the game. So, he's slightly above average there, and he has range, which isn't bad. This would absolutely be one of those situations where I could see them giving a character an image of throwing something or a ranged weapon and then not giving them range. That happens within the game, but we didn't get that with Bullseye. So Bullseye is 3/4/5 with range. That's okay. And he has the ability to pay 2 yellow and wound a face-up supporting character. When Bullseye KOs an enemy character, he gains an XP. This is really expensive. This isn't stun a face-up supporting character. This is wound a face-up supporting character. So you put the hurt on the guy, and then they're still there to block or do whatever else for the rest of the turn. Now, maybe you put a wound on him, and then that lets Bullseye's 3 attack get in and stun the guy, but you've got to get 3 wounds. You have to get 3 KOs, ideally in the first few turns of the game, and this wound a face-up supporting character once. Just in comparison, there is a Photographic Universe card, which is photos, not quite the same, but there's a Photographic Universe main character that pays 1 blue and wounds a character until they have 1 remaining health. This is less good, twice as expensive. I feel like this is one of those powers that maybe at the time it came out, they weren't sure exactly how those powers needed to be costed. And as such, I think this is too expensive for what you get. Now, if you KO 3 characters with Bullseye, and it does specifically say Bullseye has to be the one who KOs them. So it's not just that a character has to die. They have to die by this guy's hand. Then he becomes a 5/6/5, which... those are okay stats, but not fantastic. I think he could have easily been a 6/6/5, and this card would still probably be not super playable. And he gains the ability, a Lovely Night for Murder, pay 3 red, and wound a face-up main character. This just is not good enough. It is way too expensive for what it does. I just do not see Bullseye ever being a main character that a lot of people, even at the kitchen table, he's just so expensive to do anything. If you want to use each of his superpowers one time, you need 5 resources. So we're talking about 4 yellows, 4 fist towers, 4 reds, and that facilitates you using these powers maybe a total of 2-3 times. You can't use the red power 3 times, even with a full suite of Training Grounds and Fisk Towers. You're still only going to get 2 of those reds. And then are you not using any of your Fisk Towers for the infallible aim? This guy's just not good enough. Next up, Daredevil. Widely considered to be the worst main character in the game for quite a while. Perhaps unreasonably so. I think he was the worst main character in the game during kind of an important period early in the game's life, during that legacy meta period. And a lot of us players who have been here from the beginning or near the beginning carry some assumptions about the legacy meta forward into... maybe some of our assumptions are not as valid now as they once were. I do not think Daredevil is as terrible now as he was when this set came out. When this set came out, this guy was unplayable. Let's keep in mind, Defenders came out before A-Force. Now, Defenders was delayed, so there wasn't much of a meta window in between Defenders and A-Force. But before the existence of Moonstone, this guy was absolutely unplayable. So within the box of Defenders, we're starting off with 2 main characters. This is not a strong start. But let's get into Daredevil, and then we'll talk about why he's such a difficult to use main character. He's a 2/5/5, not fantastic stats at all. Man without fear. Combat, red power, he strikes with double his attack this combat. Okay, so he's got fearless and violent, but you have to pay a red to get it. That's not too bad. When Daredevil gets attacked, if he's protecting a character, he gains an XP. So all your opponent has to do is not attack Daredevil while he's protecting a character, and you never level up. Or if your opponent has a flyer, they just fly over Daredevil and hit the back row, and you never level up. All they had to do to make this guy at least reasonable was put the word grab on this card. If you made it so characters can't fly over Daredevil, then Daredevil becomes infinitely more playable. So what do you get if you jump through this impossible? If your opponent misplays into letting you get all that experience, you become a 4/8/5, decent stats for level 2. Again, I think this is a little bit of an artifact of the era when this card came out. It was only competing with base set main characters, and therefore his power level probably could have been pushed. But early in the game, I think the designers were very, very careful to not let things power levels radically jump out of bounds with other characters. So, Man Without Fear, he still has the double attack, and now that's actually pretty reasonable. You pay a red, you get a hit for 8. Again, the era this came out, that was quite good. Now it's a little bit power crept, but it's still, that power is not a bad power. Radar Sense. This is so dumb. Enemy players must play with their hands revealed. That is extremely good. I would pay yellow and look at your hand for the rest of the game all day long. The problem is, all an enemy player has to do is pay a red, and this is one of those cards that would have gotten an errata since the new templating. This would be rephrased to say an enemy main character may pay a red during their main phase to end this effect. So you jump through these impossible hoops to get this chump leveled up, and then once he levels up, you get to do your ultimate power, and your opponent can counter it with a single location. What? Why? Why is this guy so harnessed, so held back? I don't understand. Playing him out of just this box, I think Daredevil is borderline unplayable. Probably unplayable. With cards out of, say, the Legacy expansion, with Stick, with Moonstone out of A-Force, there are now, with the, what's the Brotherhood guy? Mesmero, that gives opposing characters lumbering. There are now a lot of other support cards that would allow Daredevil to actually be a functional main character, but you pack all that stuff into your deck, and the payoff is a level 2 power that your opponent can just turn off with a single location. This guy is just not good. I don't know if he's still the worst card in the game, or the worst main character in the game. Probably not, actually. There's some stinkers out there now. But a character so bad a music video had to be created to talk about how bad this guy is. Doctor Strange. Now, this is a main character I have actually been fond of since basically the release of this set. I bought this expansion and A-Force on the same day, but they came out only a couple weeks apart, so I guess I was slightly late to the Doctor Strange party, but I really like what this guy does. I'm a big fan of drawing cards. In a lot of my deck builds, I like to put in things that put more options into my hand. As a player, that's just one of my preferences, is I want to feed my hand with lots of cards. So, 2/4/5, that is the bad stat block. 2/4/5 sucks. Flight, that's not bad. I like the ability to get over the top of, say, Daredevil and hit the back row. Supreme Knowledge. You pay a blue, you get to draw a card, and you can use this any number of times on your turn. Now, of course, this is throttled. You only have so many blues in the deck, but the ability to turn you draw a card and it just becomes another card. Cycling through your deck in that way is very strong. I'm a huge fan of running the maximum number of copies of the best cards that I need to win the game, and then other cards that fill in get me to those maximum number of copies of the cards that I need to win the game. So I think this power is fantastic. Whenever you draw one or more cards, Doctor Strange gains an XP. That's also not bad. If you completely brick and you don't do anything, you still level on turn 5. Now, turn 5 is a late level, particularly with this stat block, but it doesn't lock you out of the game. He's not one of these main characters where you end up in the situation where you just can't ever level. I mean, conceivably, he could die before your turn 5. If you go second and you don't draw anything, that's not great, and his stats do not give him much durability. At level 2, he retains flight, becomes a 4/7/5. Again, these stats are just so anemic compared to more recent expansions, but this guy came out in 2015, 2016, I think, and here we are, almost 2021. In order to keep the game fresh and to keep things interesting, and also I think the game developers have kind of come into their own a little bit more, where they have a little bit more confidence in pushing the envelope without breaking things. I kind of forgive them for being hesitant and cautious after what happened with Thanos in the original set, kind of almost breaking the game. Really, like, that really hurt the game out of the gate to have one main character that was so much more powerful than the rest. But the reaction to that, of having these kind of flat kind of cards, that I feel like if Doctor Strange came out today, he would be doing a lot more than this. So these stats just should be better, but they're not unplayably bad. He still has the ability to juice his card draw, which I like, and he gains mass transmutation. Pay yellow, choose any number of characters. For each one, remove its +1 counters and put that many -1 counters onto it, or vice versa. So this turns your weakness, if you're got a bunch of minuses on your guys, into a strength, or it turns your opponent's strength into a weakness. Depending upon the matchup, this power can absolutely decide games. If your opponent's whole game plan is that they're going all in on having a bunch of green counters, like a Thor player, or some kind of Megan abuse, or you have all of a sudden this massive amount of strength they've accumulated through snowballing turn after turn, you level up and just kill everything. That's pretty good. So I do think, I guess one other thing here is, if your opponent is not relying on +1 counters at all, and you have a level up that just doesn't do anything. If your opponent is not trying to chip your board down with -1 counters or build their board up with +1 counters, Doctor Strange's level 2 is functionally blank. Now, that might not matter based on the deck. This could just be gravy, essentially. I think in most cases you're playing Doctor Strange because of the blue power, because you want the extra cards in hand, because card advantage means options, and options mean chances to outplay your opponent. I think that's why you play Doctor Strange, and this level 2 here is just kind of gravy. There are some main characters for whom their level 2 power is the whole reason you play the card, and there are some characters, to take a phrase from Bert, you can cut the legs off and ignore part of the card and they're still totally playable. I think Doctor Strange falls into the legless camp, where even if you don't put yellows in the deck and you just have the sanctums, if you need it, it's there. It could be really good. It could decide the outcome of some games, but I don't think that power is the reason you play this character. So out of the 3 so far, Doctor Strange is definitely the most playable. Ghost Rider. This is a character that is near-ish to my heart. My son is a huge fan of the character from the comics, and Joe in my playgroup worked very, very hard on trying to make a playable Ghost Rider deck back in the era before even Aliens came out. Spirit of Vengeance. You pay a lemon and a lime, and you can stun an enemy character that attacked since your last turn. This is very good in certain matchups. If your opponent is on a deck that requires them to attack to level up, or requires them to attack because they need to control the board in order to set up their mid and late game conditions, this power is very good. You just get to swat a guy. Now, 2 resources to swat a guy feels pretty rough. It is expensive, and it's not so much that the power itself is overcosted, it's that it puts a throttle on the total number of times in any given game where you're going to be able to play that power. And that is relevant. This is expensive. His level 2 costs, this is a card that is very resource hungry. And his level up kind of sucks. When another character on your side gets KO'd on an enemy player's turn, Ghost Rider gains an XP. Now, I have many times gone on at some length as to how you do not want to play characters where your opponent gets to control your level up condition, and Ghost Rider is no difference. His is a little bit less bad than Daredevil in that you have a little bit more control, because if I put Ghost Rider in the back and I put flyers up front, well, now you have to chop through my flyers. Even if you have flight, you have to chop through my flyers to get to my Ghost Rider to make it so that I can't get that XP. Whereas Daredevil has to be in front with guys behind him, and flight just cancels that entire level up condition. Ghost Rider is a little bit more tricksy. If you pair this with things like Uncanny Defense from the X-Men set, Dramatic Entrance from the A-Force set, his level up becomes a lot more doable. But what you really need here is 1 and 2 cost flyers, and within this box there aren't that many. There are hardly any 1 and 2 cost flyers. I feel like these cards are a little bit too big. There we go. So at level 2, you keep your same level 1 power. You become a 7/6, which is a massive jump in stats. He went from a 0/6 to a 7/6. Cannot be overstated how important that is. This guy needed some stats at level 1. I do not understand why they made him a 0/6. I guess they were offsetting the 6 health, since this was in an era before they really gave things 6 health that often. I don't understand that balancing choice to make his level 1 a 0 attack. I think that's just straight up not good and really hurts the character. His level 2 power, pay a red. If Ghost Rider is ready, drive him to an enemy row. He may make any number of melee attacks, one at a time, against characters in that row. When he gets stunned or you're done attacking, drive him back to one of your rows exhausted. This power is great. If you can get him a little bit of extra attack bump so that you can just chop through a row, you time it so that the guy who can hit you back is the last guy you attack. It's almost like Fing Fang Foom before Fing Fang Foom existed. The issue you're going to have is if your opponent is ahead on board, and you have every reason to think they are ahead on board because you're playing little piddly guys that are just going to dirtle and you want them to die. So there's no reason to think that when you level, Ghost Rider is going to be in any kind of intimidating or controlling position with regard to board. Yes, Hell on Wheels can bring some board parity back to the game. It can get you to a place where you can dig out of the hole that your level up condition put you into. And the Spirit of Vengeance is, again, a good power. It's just an expensive power. So how many times are you realistically going to be able to pay for it? And you also have to draw into it. So even if you put the cards in your deck that would let you be able to pay for it 4, 6 times, are you going to see those cards? I just don't know. So Ghost Rider is within the realm of playability. I would put him at a solidly kitchen table deck, though. There's just a lot of things that make what he wants to do difficult, and that is why I think we have not seen him make much of an appearance at any significant tournament table. Although I think Bert did something with him in like a multiplayer event. So again, he's a playable card. It's Bullseye and Daredevil are dumpster tier. Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider are climbing out of that. Next up, Kingpin. Now, Kingpin was the guy who got level 3 treatment in the Battles box. I guess so did Daredevil, but his level 3 suffers from all the same level up problems as his original, so doesn't really matter. But Kingpin in just this box is 2/5/5, okay stats. Pay a green, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, put a location from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom in any order. Now, I have never been a fan of this type of very weak search. There was multiple instances of it early in the game where you would spend a resource to look at only 5 cards out of your 50 or whatever remaining cards in your deck, and you have to hit a specific type of card to get something for that. There are situations where you just pay a green and get nothing. You just spend a card for no reason at all, and that is so frustrating. Later in the game, we saw cards like Ghost from the Predator expansion, who just churns through all the cards on the top of your deck until you hit something. Kane is another one. So it doesn't let you targetedly search for one specific thing, but it does let you get a type of card, and that gives the player a little bit more agency, a little bit more control over what they're going to see. This reveal the top 5 from your deck type of search, I think, is generally pretty bad. I do not like having to rely on that at all. I would rather build my deck in such a way that I'm going to just see this stuff through natural draw than have to spend resources on maybe not getting anything. But it's there if you need it, and since his level up condition requires locations to appear on your side, you probably are going to find yourself using this at some point or another to try to fix a bad draw. With 5 experience points, you're looking at leveling Kingpin on your turn 5 without some kind of mirage ramp scenario, which does not exist within just this box. So you're looking at a pretty reliable turn 5 level up for Kingpin. He becomes a 5/7/5. Again, these stats are fine, but I think they're showing their age a little bit. I'm going to try to refrain from saying that in every single main character review, but this is just a truism about these older sets, that the game has gotten pushed. They've gotten a little bit power crept out of there. Now, the abilities and the things that some of these cards do are still generally, there are places where they are playable. I don't think these cards are coasters, but stat block wise, the game has moved past 5/7/5 on a level 2 for a lot of characters. He gets the ability to pay any color of the original 4 colors and put a +1 counter on a character, and he can do this any number of times. I don't think this power is the reason you choose to play Kingpin. I think if you're playing Kingpin, it's because you want to go for the level 3, which is vastly stronger than this level 2. And in this Battles Royale format, is this kind of combat pump going to be enough? Maybe. It's certainly playable, but his level up is a little bit slow, his stats are a little bit weak, and doing 1 card for 1 counter is not a very good exchange rate. If you compare it to, say, Fair and Balanced, this is 1 card for 2 counters. Or You Won't Like Her When She's Angry, 1 card for 2 counters. So the repeatability of this turns all of your locations into potential pumps, but they are pumps that are just not that strong. So I would put Kingpin kind of into the same bucket as maybe Doctor Strange. Right now I've got Bullseye and Daredevil at the very bottom, then Ghost Rider, then Doctor Strange and Kingpin just a little bit above that. Luke Cage. Now this is a guy who has actually seen an appearance at serious tournament tables. He is a 4/3/5. That 4 attack on the level 1 means he can get into a lot of things that he probably doesn't deserve to get into right at the beginning of the game. I like seeing that. And the aggressive bend to his stats is completely okay because of his level 1 impervious skin power. In combat, you pay a green, and if Luke Cage gets stunned this combat, he doesn't get a wound. Now, it's really important. If you're going to play Luke Cage, you have to remember that this is a combat power. If you let the combat resolve and then go, oh, I was going to pay a green to prevent that wound, it is too late, bud. At the kitchen table, sure, people will probably let it slide. But if you're at a tournament table, and you're especially at a high level of the tournament table, that's the kind of misplay that can cost you a game. Oh, I got the green and I forgot to spend it. Another really cool thing with him is you hide the greens in your hand, so your opponent feels good about their attacks, and then when they attack in, you throw that green from hand, prevent the wound, they get cracked back, and now you're way ahead. In order to level up, you have to spend resource points to give Luke Cage XP equivalent to his resources. So one of the things that Luke Cage does is you build your deck with a bunch of 1-drops, and you don't necessarily have to play a 1-drop on turn 1, but you play 1, 2, and then you've got across the first 3 turns, you have 6 available recruit points, right? 3, then 2, then 1. So you can have 1-drops in there that you're going to throw out either on turn 1 or 2 or 3, and you're going to level at the same time. So that means you have more space in your deck because you know you're more or less giving up 2 drops, say, or giving up 3 drops in the deck, and that creates more available slots and less pressure on your mulligan conditions. So that's something that's one of those like intangibles that Luke Cage brings to the table. When he levels up, he becomes a 6/6/5, which at the time that this was printed, these stats were great for a main character. He retains impervious skin, so potentially you have 8 times throughout the course of the game that you can get attacked and not take a wound. That's really awesome. And he gets the ability to pay yellow, search your hand, deck, and KO pile for an Iron Fist, and put it into play. So if you're running Iron Fist, that means you're probably also running reds. So your deck is greens, reds, sanctums. Iron Fist comes out, and he's able to remove big threats. For anyone, we'll deal with Iron Fist when we get to Iron Fist. He's a little bit later down. But this is very good. This design of this main character makes it so you don't take wounds. He's got decent stats, maybe even better than decent stats if you consider the era when this guy came out. And the ability to go search out an Iron Fist means that you're going to be able to snipe and take down either large drops that have printed stats that you couldn't deal with, or characters that have had stacks of counters put on top of them. So you can clear stuff out of the way, you can get that last wound. I really like Luke Cage. Out of the main characters we've looked at so far, he's definitely the best one. He's just head and shoulders above everything else we've looked at so far, assuming that you're only building out of just the Defender's box. Now, if you open him up to a wider card pool, he's even better, because as soon as you include Legacy in the mix, then you have access to Reality Shift, and on top of being able to prevent wounds, he can now heal wounds. And you have Stick, which makes Luke Cage even better when Stick comes down again. So this is a absolutely playable main character, arguably one of the best main characters in a loyalty-only format, and has proven to be good outside of loyalty only, although he is kind of starting to get a little bit power crept. Venom. Now this is one of my favorite cards, entirely because of the art. I absolutely love this artwork. I love Venom as a character from the comics, and I do genuinely like how his character works. He has this revenge bond power. You pay a blue, and if Venom recovered this turn, you put 2/+1 counters on him. So he comes out as a 3/3, but if your opponent cracks him and you have a blue, all of a sudden he's a 5/5. And a level 1 5/5 in the era when these cards came out was extremely good. Whenever he gains 1 or more +1 counters, he gains an XP. So you pack this deck full of power-ups, you pack this deck full of the, fair and balanced, just ways to put +1 counters onto Venom so you can level quickly, and then also you have a bunch of +1 counters on you. So you're big and beefy and can go and stab things in the face. It does take 5 counters, so there can be turns where you just kind of get stranded without the ability to put a +1 counter on Venom. And there are going to be times where if your opponent chooses not to attack because you're showing a blue, you just kind of get stuck. And if you get stuck to the point where your opponent fully controls the board, all of a sudden 2/+1 counters doesn't look good enough. If I'm dropping 5 drops on the table, you being a 5/5 is much less intimidating. Now, when he levels up, he becomes a 6/6. This is a great stat block for a level 2. The 6 health is also pretty awesome for Venom, particularly at the time that this came out. Was he the only 6 health? There had to be another 6 health MC. Anyway, this was 6 health was definitely a lot of health at the time this card released. I don't think it was until the Battles box or the A-Force box that we saw 7 health main characters. His other power, the power that he gains at level 2, gives him Symbiosis, which means that he can keep +1 counters while he is stunned. So if you can level quickly and you hit the greens when you need them, your opponent being able to get over your pile of green counters doesn't matter. oh, you're going to stun me? Cool, I'm going to pay a green. I'm going to keep all of that. Nah, I'll pay a blue next turn and get even bigger. So Venom is definitely a playable character. I do think you have to go into kind of an aggro archetype with him. I think if you try to go the long game, eventually your opponent is going to grind the greens and blues out of you. And once you crack him in a way that removes all of the +1 counters that you spent the early game accumulating, and you do need to spend the early game accumulating them or else he's not going to level up. So you're coming in with your foot on the gas as hard as you can to try to get that level up. And if your opponent is able to knock that house of cards down, Venom can definitely end up in trouble. So you come in strong, you come in as hard as you can, and you try to kill the opponent before they're able to field a character that is big enough to remove all of the buffs off of your Venom. And that shapes up to be a pretty good day some of the time. Winter Soldier. So we're going to finish the main characters here with another pretty lackluster main character. 245, the stats of death, as others have said. He does have range, so that's good. If Winter Soldier is in a melee combat, he gets +2/+2. So he can become a 4/6 on turn 1, but that's still kind of like, okay. He does have range, so if you want to use the range, then this bionic arm power doesn't do anything because it's only in melee, which isn't great. So there's a little bit of non-bow anti-synergy happening on this card. When he stuns a defending character, you may freeze Winter Soldier. If you do, he gains an XP. That sucks. That is just straight up bad. So you've got to stun somebody turn 1, you don't get any attacks on turn 2, and then you have to stun somebody on turn 3 in order to level up. Okay, I mean, I get it. I get the flavor of Winter Soldier goes back into the freezy thing, and then they bring him out to do another assassination or whatever. Like, the theme of it, the flavor of the card kind of fits. But who comes to a game and is like, I want to play every other turn? No, man, I want to play every turn. So what do you get when you level up? He becomes a 7/5/5, still has range. Now 7 attack with range, potentially on turn 5. Because if you attack on 1, you're frozen on 2. You attack on 3, you're frozen on 4. Well, that looks less good. It just looks less good. If you can get leveled and you can start making attacks with 7 attack, safe attacks with that range, that is actually playable. That's not a bad stat block, but you have to get there. Now, his bionic arm stays, so you can become a 9/7 if you're doing melee attacks, which I guess that's okay. Sniper rifle, pay a red. Winter Soldier can make solo ranged attacks against protected characters. So this was stealth before stealth existed. Now stealth exists. So he basically has stealth, but you have to pay for it every time. And I guess it's not stealth. There's a different word for it, for ranged. What is it? Sniper, I guess. So it's sniper before sniper existed, and you have to pay for it. It's just not good enough, man. Even in a vacuum, even if you ignore the fact that other characters get this power basically for free, you have two different powers that don't work well with each other. When you level the character up, you get less incentive to use the level 1 power. Maybe you use this only defensively, but he's not really statted to be defensive. I just don't think this main character is very good. I think if you really like Winter Soldier and you want to play with something that kind of has a Winter Soldier feel, it does have a Winter Soldier feel. I will give you that. The flavor on the card definitely feels like Bucky. But I don't think it feels like game winning. So out of all these main characters, I really think that Kingpin, Doctor Strange, Venom, and Luke Cage are the playables, particularly if you're only playing out of this box. Maybe I'm undervaluing the combat pump that is available to Winter Soldier, because if you're playing Battles Royale, you're not going to have access to a lot of the best combat pump in the game. So maybe that +2/+2 is going to matter more in that format. I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced. All right, moving on to the plot twist. I think I'm going to start with the two generics, and then I'll do the Defenders, and then I'll do the Underworld. So to start with the two generics, a plot twist I have long said is not good. Choose a team affiliation. If all characters on your side have that affiliation, put a +1 counter on each of them. So you've got to, I think you have to control at least 3 characters to make this card worth running. If you don't control at least 3 characters, then you might as well run Fair and Balanced. You might as well run some other team restricted plot twist. Oh, that's weird. There are other team restricted plot twists that give you more value without having to jump through the hoop of making sure that the team affiliations on your side are a certain way. Now, I do like this type of loyalty plot twist because it doesn't require you to build your deck a certain way. It only has a play requirement. So you can have a few different kinds of team affiliations in your deck, and as long as you ensure that you want to have somebody face down, like let's say I have an Underworld main character and I have a bunch of Defenders supporting characters. Well, if you make your main character face down, then you can play this and you ultimately end up being able to get value out of it, even though you didn't build your deck in a loyal format. So this does have a little bit more flexibility than like Reality Shift or one of those other loyalty plot twists. But I mean, there's just going to be use cases where you're playing this for a single +1/+1 counter, and I do not think that that is good value. Shock to the System. Maybe the best plot twist in the game. Certainly the most played plot twist in the game. This is a strict upgrade to sort of the comparable plot twist of Find Cover, which existed since the base box, but this one has the added benefit of, instead of giving you +3 defense, it gives you your attacker -3 attack, and that's going to matter a whole lot when we get down to Iron Fist. This is a great plot twist. The fact that the Battles Royale format limits it to only the teams within this box, I think automatically makes the Defenders box worth looking at, just on the basis of how good this plot twist is. Shock to the System, I cannot overstate how useful, and it's not just useful in narrow cases. It is ubiquitously useful. It is useful in basically every deck could use a combat swing of 3 at some point. This is a very good card. Very, very good card. Fair and Balanced. Put a +1 counter on a character and a -1 counter on a character. So this creates a stat swing of 2/2, which is comparable to You Won't Like Her When She's Angry. And I can't think of what the name of the Inhumans plot twist is that puts 2 +1 counters on something. Point is, getting to a stat adjustment of 2/2 out of a plot twist is kind of standard for team limited good plot twists. So Earth's Mightiest Heroes from Avengers gives a stat swing of 2/2. Now this doesn't in the form of giving a friendly character a buff and an enemy character a minus, so there's a little bit of more flexibility there. You don't have to commit this to one combat. You could use this plot twist to make 2 different combats favorable to you in a turn. I think this plot twist is very good. Is it worth running Underworld for? I don't know, but particularly in the Battle Royale format, I think this is going to see some play. You absolutely run this in Venom, without a doubt. You run this in Venom, and just generally, if you have Underworld cards in your deck, this is a card that's worth looking at. It's power level wise, it's fine, although not every deck is going to need it. Play Dead. Stun a defending supporting character, but it doesn't get wounded. So this is showing its age just a little bit. It should just say Daze a supporting character on your side, but I guess this was created before they had the terminology Daze. I don't think we saw that for the first time until A-Force. But setting that templating issue aside, you need a specific deck where you want this. This essentially is a card that says target supporting character on your side gains +1 health, or heal wound off supporting character on your side. When you use this in conjunction with a card like Carnage, who has Symbiosis, so he can hang on to his +1 counters even though he gets stunned, that can be pretty good. I think you want a specific kind of deck where you want this card, though. I think you either don't play this at all, which is the case for most decks, or you have a deck where board presence is important enough that you're willing to devote an entire card in your deck to just keep a guy alive for an extra turn. So very narrow, playable, but narrow use cases. Pain and Suffering. I will not ever play this plot twist. Choose a character to get -2 this combat. I do not think a stat adjustment of 2 is good enough. I think at minimum you want to see a stat adjustment of 3 if you're playing with that. Or if you're playing with like combat math plot twists, I think the ability to change a stat by 2 is just, well, it's just not good enough. I've never played this card in any deck. I don't think that will change anytime soon. All right, moving on to the defender's plot twists. Enemy players can't play plot twists this combat. The problem with this is it's only good when you're attacking. If I declare an attack and then I play Spellbound, it basically gives my character's Combat Master, and that is good. The problem is, if I have a character with Combat Master and you attack him, you can't play plot twists. But Spellbound, I can't play it until after you've had a chance to respond. So if you need a plot twist to get over my guy, you attack my guy, you get priority because you're attacking, you play your plot twist, and oh, now Spellbound does nothing. I have put this card in decks, and if there is a meta where you are particularly worried about things like Savage Surprise, Uncanny Defense, Dramatic Entrance, where you're particularly worried about defensive plot twists, maybe this gets into your deck. I doubt it. I really doubt it. It just, some percentage of the time, this card reads, do nothing. You think you know what your opponent has in your hand. You think that they've got a defensive pump. You make your attack. You play this to guarantee they can't play their defensive pump. And oh, it turns out they didn't have it anyway. So, not the best card. The effect, sure. There are times where the effect is going to be good, but not enough where I want to play Spellbound with any degree of regularity. Hidden Weapons. A card I have publicly crapped on for years. Choose a character on your side to get +1/+1, and range. Not a +1 counter, just +1/+1. And you can do this both on the attack and on the defense. If you do it on the attack, though, you have to play it. I guess you don't have to play it as a main phase, because this says, no, because that means any turn combat, so you can play it defensively. I think the any turn combat symbol means you can play this while defending, but I'm not sure it means you can play it while attacking. I think you might have to play this before you declare your attack and not use it as an in. I might need a rules clarification on that. Either way, I don't think this card does enough. I think a temporary stat buff of 1/1 does not clear the barrier of 3. Yes, the range is relevant. I think the range, particularly the defensive value, where your opponent thinks they're going to get a safe ranged attack in on your main character or whatever else, you play this, all of a sudden I'm hitting you back. That is the use case where this card is good. That is the use case where this card is at all playable. I think most of the time, if this card is in my deck, I would rather take it out and put anything else in there. I'd rather have a Savage Surprise than this. But I guess if you are worried about a meta with a lot of range and you know your deck doesn't have a lot of range, but your guys do have a lot of attack, then maybe you throw it in there and somebody tries to hit Luke Cage's tiny little 3 defense and you get to crack them back. Super Senses, best defensive plot twist in the game. I don't think there's an argument. Maybe you can make an argument for Dramatic Entrance, I guess, but no. This is the best defensive plot twist in the game in terms of a defensive stat adjustment. That cannot be argued. There are plot twists that say cancel the combat. Maybe that could be considered better defensive plot twists, but in terms of the raw stats that you can put on a character to just absorb the hit, it doesn't get any better than this. +5 defense is great. It's a reason to run defenders. It's a reason to splash defenders in a deck that you would not otherwise run defenders. And if you have a defender's main character, it seems inconceivable that you would not want to run Super Senses as a 4-up. This is a fantastic card. It's going to remain a fantastic card. I can't say too much good stuff about this. There's no situation where a game, I guess I shouldn't say no situation. If you're in a game where your opponent only wants to combo you and they don't have any interest in attacking you, okay, in that matchup, this card doesn't work very well. But that's a very narrow silo of use cases. In the vast preponderance of games, +5 defense is something that will be relevant at some point throughout the game. and you can't do defense better than super senses. My only criticism of this card is it should have been called acrobatic dodge. We have our 2 wild card locations. There's not really a lot to say here. They're resources for characters. Cool. Moving on. Angel, a 1-drop I have never played. He is a 2-1 or 2-3, sorry, a 2-3 flyer with 1 health that can't be ranged attacked and has the ability to heal a wound off a supporting character. I just don't think healing wounds off supporting characters is that relevant, particularly in the era of the game when this card was printed. Many of the supporting characters, 1 health, 1 health, 1 health. Okay, Hellcat has 2, but for the most part, we got lots of supporting characters with only 1 health. Like just scrolling down, looking at this box, there's 2, there's 2. So there are a few 2s, but healing a wound off of a supporting character. What supporting character are you going to play that you care that much about keeping alive? That you're going to devote at minimum 2 cards in your deck. You have to have 1 copy of Angel and you have to have a lab in order to pay that and heal 1 wound. Who is it that you care about being on the board that badly? Maybe if this was some kind of combo and you're trying to stack a bunch of counters on Megan and it's like, oh, I need her to survive for a turn. I'm sure there are use cases where that type of resource allocation makes sense. They are narrow. There aren't that many. I do not think this is a good card. Carnage, 1/1/2. Right when I go off about how all supporting characters only have 1 health. 1/1/2. He gets a +1 counter whenever he gets stunned or stuns an enemy character, and he gets to keep his counters while stunned. I wish he had like a 2/2 or something. Just a slightly better stat block, I think, was necessary here to make this card into a playable. Okay, congratulations to my daughter, who apparently pulled her math grade up to acceptable levels. So I just talked about how no supporting characters have multiple health in this era of the game, and this guy has 2, but are you going to spend a heal on this guy? I don't think so. So his power set is really good. The ability to generate +1 counters with maximum carnage is absolutely playable. I actually really like this card. I do think he has been kind of power crept out of playability over the years. If you're playing a deck that wants lots of +1 counters on the board and isn't necessarily trying to funnel all of them to 1 character, he's probably worth taking a look at. As far as the 1-drops available in this battles box, if you want to get on the board and fight, he's your only option in Underworld, frankly. Defender's Hellcat, 2/2/2. While attacking an exhausted character, it can't strike back against her. Cheese and crackers. Man, I've played this card, and I don't think I ever noticed that weird flavor text before. Cheese and crackers. What? That's got to be some kind of like Golden Age reference that I am not familiar with. So this power is sometimes relevant. It's a little bit hit or miss. 2/2/2 on a 1-drop is a fine stat block. It's been power crept a little bit now, but it's still playable. Particularly in Luke Cage, this would give you a turn 1, turn 2 team attack for 6, which is pretty good. That's a pretty relevant. Being able to get into 6 on turns 1, 2, 3 is definitely a good stat block. So I think this card is playable. Out of the 2 1-drops available for defenders in this box, Hellcat is maybe not an amazing card, but she's playable, whereas I think Angel is just garbage. Helmet Zemo, 2/1/1 with range. Underworld affiliated, and you get a look at an enemy player's hand and choose a character that does not share a team affiliation with their main character, and the player discards that card. This is good in 2 different ways. You get knowledge of what your opponent is going to be able to play over the next few turns because you get to look at their hand, and that's certainly good. you also get the ability to chip something out of their hand. Now, I think the value of the discard effect on this card goes down tremendously if you're playing the Battles Royale format. You know that your opponent is going to be locked to one of two teams, or I guess three if we're talking about the X-Files box. But for the most part, all the Battles boxes are only two teams, so whoever their main character is, there is such a good chance that they are going to be playing cards that do share an affiliation with their main character. I don't think it's likely that we are going to see a lot of fully loyal decks in this format because there's absolutely no payoff for playing fully loyal decks. You don't have access to... I guess if you're playing the Shield versus Hydra deck, you have access to Unwavering Loyalty, but Stand Together is not in the format. The Legacy Loyalty plot twists are not in the format. So you do have a chance of hitting characters that don't share an affiliation with the opposing main character because you know they're probably going to be running some. But it is a significantly lower chance than if we were just in a wide open format. If we're playing Cosmic or we're playing... I'm drawing a blank on the names of other formats. If we're playing basically any other format where we have a full card pool or where your deck pool, even if it's like Big Apple battles where there's a limited number of teams, but you can use anybody from any of those teams in your deck, Zemo gets better and better the more teams your opponent is likely to be playing. Again, we don't want to ignore that looking at the opposing hand is a good value. Is it valuable enough that you're willing to spend a whole card to get a early peek at their hand? Maybe that informs how you play your Spellbound that game. I don't know. I think Zemo is potentially playable in this format, but I think a lot of his value is going to happen outside of the Battles Royale format, particularly when you pair him with somebody like Satana from the A-Force box. He's very good. So I think this is a good card, but I do not think it is a great card in Battles Royale. Dagger. This has been a combo piece for a lot of decks. If you are trying to do something where you have fragile characters on board like Senator Kelly, or trying to get to the chopper, or any time when you're worried about like a Thor heavy meta where you're worried that your opponent is going to use -1 counters as removal, Dagger prevents your opponent from using -1 counters as removal. That's what she does. Her range, her 3/1/1, all of that is almost irrelevant. The reason you play this card is for the Purifying Light power. I think it's very good, if a little bit meta dependent, because there are going to be matchups where you play this, and if your opponent isn't trying to use -1 counters on you, she does nothing. And 3/1/1 is, I mean, it's range, 3 attack, range, that can hit some things. Like, these stats aren't unplayably bad, but if you don't think you're going to see -1 counters, I'm not sure this is the 2-drop you want to put into your deck. Electro, 2/2/1 with range. His stats, kind of like Dagger, are almost irrelevant because the reason you run this guy is Chain Lightning. You pay a blue, stun each enemy character that costs 2 or less. This card is good. It's a little bit situational. There are definitely going to be decks where your opponent doesn't care about playing low drops, like say a Luke Cage matchup where you might be paying a blue to stun one character, which isn't great. That's not the highest value. What you want to do is play this onto a board where your opponent has like a 32/32 Megan and you're just like, haha, solved. So I think this card is definitely playable, and you play him for this power, and you want to play him when you think the meta is going to line up with little guys for him to hit. Even if there's no little guys for him to hit, 2/2 with range on turn 2 is not the worst stat block ever. It's not good. Some of the value on this card has been taken from the stats and put into this Chain Lightning power. But this is a guy with the floor that's maybe slightly below average and an upside that is borderline infinite. This power, in the right matchup, can absolutely win a game. Iron Fist. I mentioned before we were going to talk about this guy in a little bit more detail with regard to shock to the system and regard to level 2 Luke Cage. So he can't be ranged attacked. Who cares? He's a 2/4/1, And I guess not, who cares? That is the dodge is relevant here. But what matters most is the Iron Fist punch. On any combat, you can pay a red, and when Iron Fist strikes the character, you stun that character. So I attack in with somebody just to try to get Iron Fist out of the way so I can get to your back row. You pay a red, and you're able to hit my guy with 10 defense back and stun him. He is able to get into main characters. He is able to get everywhere, and you can recycle him not infinitely, but up to a maximum of 8 times with Luke Cage level 2. You just keep pulling him back out of the KO pile and killing something else. That's extremely good, and because he is so extremely good, that is why Shock to the System took over the generic plot twist meta for years in the game of Versus. If you're running Find Cover and you attack me with Iron Fist, I play my Find Cover, you still hit my guy, you still stun my guy. But if you attack me with Iron Fist and I play Shock to the System, now Iron Fist has -1 attack. So you'd need at least 2 power-ups to pull Iron Fist out of that situation and still be able to strike and therefore get that stun that costs a red. This guy is very, very good. This is a card that solves all kinds of problems. Kind of like Charlie 27, only he doesn't have 3 health, so you only get him once per recruit, and he costs more than Charlie 27. But he's a card in that same kind of vein where he solves big stacks of counters, naturally high stats, some kind of weird combat trick. He basically turns off plot twist for your opponent outside of Shock to the System. He does so many good things. This is a very good, very playable card, and particularly in Luke Cage, he's a playable card that you only have to run like 1 or 2 copies of because you can search him out again, and you can notably search him out of the KO pile as well as your deck or whatever. So Iron Fist, very, very good in Luke Cage, an absolute must play in Luke Cage, and just generally a very good card. Maybe one of the most meta cards we've hit so far in this box other than Shock to the System. So Mary Walker is a little bit of a different case. There are 4 copies of her. They all have different text, but they're all one of a kind and named Mary Walker. So this is kind of like what they did with Sentinels, but like before Sentinels. This Mary Walker, while she's attacking a defender that has a -1 counter, they can't strike back. 4/2 stats on a 2-drop is okay. This Mary Walker, when she attacks, put a -1 counter on up to 2 enemy characters. I definitely like that a little bit better as far as an ability, and her stats are kind of a medium place. And the last Mary Walker, while she's defending, each attacker with a -1 counter can't strike her, and she's a 2/4. So we have kind of an attack-centric Mary Walker that has the ability to not get struck back. We have a defensive-centric Mary Walker that has the ability to not get struck while being attacked. And we have a Mary Walker that kind of supports the other 2 Mary Walkers. And then the last version is this Mary Walker has the best stats out of all of them, and she gets the powers of all cards named Mary Walker out of your KO pile. I guess the line is you play her and then you drop 3 power-ups. I have never been that impressed with this card. The problem with this card is in order to make it good, you need to draw other cards with it. You have to have this sort of tipping point of a 4/4 that can't be hit when attacking or defending that spits red counters on everybody else. Like if you get the dream scenario and you play this Mary Walker and discard these Mary Walkers as power-ups, all of a sudden you've got a 7/7 who shrinks somebody by 2, well, shrinks 2 somebody's by 1 and can't be hit, and can't, if you put -1 counters and then attack other people, so you attack the guy that you're going to attack and then you put the -1 counters on whatever dude is going to remain face up, well, now all of a sudden that dude can't attack your Mary Walker. Like, so there are high level, like high roll plays with this card that make her look good, but they all require you to draw multiple anemic 2-drops and somehow get them into your KO pile. I've just never been that impressed. Even when I've tried to lean into a deck that has the theme of abusing -1 counters on the opposing player or on the opposing characters, I have not found Mary Walker to be super relevant. Rhino, some of the best card art in the game. The playmat that this guy is on just looks amazing. 5 attack on a 2-drop is pretty good. 5/3/1. He's angry, so if you want to attack at all on your turn, he has to be in that first attack. You can choose not to declare attacks, so Angry doesn't force you to attack if there's no advantageous attacks, but if there is an attack, he has to be in it. And when he attacks, an enemy player can pay a yellow to stun Rhino. So I pay 2, I attack, you pay a yellow, and kill my guy. If what you want to do is try to strangle your opponent's ability to use yellow powers, maybe you run Rhino. Probably not. This is not a great card. Maybe if you're playing an extremely aggressive Battles Royale format deck and you just need to put the pressure on, like Venom's your main character, maybe. Maybe you run this guy to try to draw out something your opponent wants to do. Like draw out a plot twist from their hand. Draw out some resources before you swing in with another character. But not, I mean, really, this puts Underworld in the position of not having any playable 2-drops. I shouldn't say no playable, no good 2-drops, which is a little bit of a bummer. Now, that said, their 1-drops are playable. Well, okay, Electro's playable. I shouldn't say that. That's a little bit too broad. But Rhino, not impressed. Mary Walker, not impressed. Scarlet Witch, the last 2-drop in the set, 1/5/1 with range and Hex. It's the only reason you play this card. You hide her in the back row and you just hope your opponent's level 1 sucks and that they can't do anything without access to their level 2. That's the reason you play this card. In general, it's tough to devote the deck slots to it, but if your opponent doesn't see it coming, you can just randomly blow somebody out by throwing a Scarlet Witch onto the board. Cloak, 3 cost, 4/4/1. At the start of each player's build phase, put a -1 counter on each character on that player's side. So the combo here is you play Dagger, then you play Cloak. So Cloak's -1 power doesn't affect your side at all. Now, this doesn't trigger when he comes into play. It only triggers at the start of turn. So you play Cloak on level 3, and then the first time the Dark Force hungers, it hits your opponent, and it doesn't hit you at all. Well, it will hit you starting your turn 4, but it goes off on the opponent first, which I think is really important. There's some of these powers out there that do something that alters the state of the game, but it lets your opponent take advantage of it first. I'm kind of drawing a blank on any of them. Oh, like Jen, if you wish for a character, your opponent has the ability to recruit the character you wished for before you do. That sucks. So Cloak, having this power that goes off, I think, in the right order, 4/4 on turn 3 is fine. It's not like the best stats, but it's not terrible. The problem with him is I think you just don't want to play him unless you have something already in play that lets you mitigate the -1 counters. And your opponent, this is a kill on sight target. If your opponent, particularly if they are a swarm deck with lots of bodies, the more bodies on a player's board, the more value you're going to get out of your Cloak. So if I've got a bunch of characters, I'm going to let that power go off once, and then I am going to put everything I have into killing Cloak, and with only 1 health, that probably is not going to be that difficult. Deathlock, 3/3/2 with range. These stats suck on turn 3. Pay a green, put a character in your KO pile on the bottom of your deck. Deathlock has that character's base attack and defense instead of his own this turn. I just don't think this card is good enough. You have to get characters into your KO pile, which is not always the easiest thing to do. The most obvious way is power-ups. But what are you powering up on turns 1, 2, and 3? I guess maybe your main character has a supporting character version. Maybe in Venom, this card is good, but the Venom supporting character that you might want to be discarding to put stats onto your main character Venom has pretty bad stats. This doesn't add the character's stats to Deathlock. It replaces his stats. I don't think that's very good. I think if this guy had add the stats of the character, then he might actually be not only playable, but good. In this current state, I don't think this guy's even playable. What turn are you going to play him? You play him on turn 3, what's in your KO pile that's going to make him any good? And you have to pay a resource for it? If Luke Cage is your main character, I don't want to pay one of my greens to this mediocre power rather than healing a wound. 1 wound is worth a heck of a lot more than what's the maximum stat buff we could get on this guy? +5/+5. That is pretty good. Not gonna lie, if you have a Ghost Rider in your KO pile and you put that back into your deck and he becomes an 8/8 on turn 3, all right, that is good. But how did that Ghost Rider get into your KO pile? I guess you powered up your Ghost Rider because you're playing a pretty bad deck. Do not like Deathlock. Never like Deathlock. Hellstrom. Whenever he gets powered up, heal a wound from him. He has a flight range 3/3/2. 3/3 on 3 is not great, but he is very sticky if you've got the power-ups for him. Now, the problem in all of these power-up dependent things is we don't have Call. In the Battles Royale format, you don't have Call. If you have Call in a Venom deck, if you have Call with Hellstrom, they just get so much better, so much more playable. I do think this is a playable card. I think it's a little bit weak, but he can be very sticky if you can get those. I mean, I've had him be 3-4 wounds before without a whole heck of a lot of difficulty. So this guy is certainly a playable card. Built-in healing is a good power, unlike Angel, where you have to play the Angel and then have a blue. This guy, just a second copy of Hellstrom, which if you're running this guy at all, you're probably running more than one copy. I cannot imagine this guy being a one of. That gives you something to do with that other card in your hand. It makes him a 4/4 and it heals a wound off of him. That's not bad. This is a playable card. Not amazing, but playable. Winter Soldier, Underworld affiliated, range 3/5/1. If you pay a red, Winter Soldier is in your back row, ready him and move him to your front row. So you can get 2 attacks out of this guy. The problem is his stats. I wish his stats were like a 5/3, because you could get a nice ranged attack, then you pay the red, you move him up front, and then you get a melee attack, and you get 2 good big attacks on turn 3. I mean, even 5 is honestly what I would have preferred to see was like a 6/2 stat block on this guy. Give me that 6 attack on turn 3. That would be great. But we don't have any of that. We don't get to live in that world. We have to live in a world where you get a total of 2 3-attack attacks out of this guy if you commit both the slots in your deck to play this as your 3-drop and you commit red locations. Feels pretty weak to me. Feels pretty weak. MODOK. So I really love this card. I think Mental Calculations is one of the best powers in the whole game. I've always loved this keyword. Mental organism designed only for KOing. So he's actually a mental organism designed only for killing, but they decided to get a little bit funny there. It's weird that I've played this card a bunch and I don't think I've ever read that flavor text on him. So flight and range, 4/5/1. That's all pretty good. I kind of wish he had 2 health. At the start of your turn, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. That power is phenomenal. It is such a good power. The problem is MODOK is a kill on sight target, absolute lightning rod. You put this guy on the board, your opponent will pour resources into killing this thing as quick as possible. You do not want to let your opponent mental calculate multiple times. It is just absolutely brutal if you let that power fire off 2-3 times. That can decide the game. You're looking if this goes off twice, you've got to look at an extra 8 cards, and out of those 8, pick the 4 best. That right there can be a game deciding thing. Now you have to keep him face up. You have to be a little bit conservative with him probably because his stats aren't the best, but his stats are playable. I don't think, for how good this power is, MODOK is not punished on the stat block anywhere near as much as somebody like Electro, say. I think Electro pays a much higher price with regard to his stats for his power than MODOK does. So very good, very playable card. Moon Knight, I think this guy sucks. 4 cost, 5/5/1. Yes, 5/5 is a decent stat block on a 4-drop, I guess. I mean, it's okay, but it's like barely okay. It's like if there's the middle of the road, he's like slightly veering to the not great side. He's like, it's just so aggressively like middle of the road, and you can use any character to power him up. Great, so you dump your hand onto this guy and then he gets KO'd immediately by your opponent's 5-drop. Nah, nah, I've never liked Moon Knight. I still don't like Moon Knight. I just don't think this card is good enough to see play. Maybe in a specific deck where you've got just all the characters in the world, but then you also need card draw to facilitate it. Otherwise, you're turning all your characters into pay one card, get one counter. And the vast majority of the time, that is not good enough. It's just not good enough. I mean, like I said before when we were talking about plot twists, I think the minimum barrier that a plot twist needs to hit in order to be considered playable is we need a stat adjustment, not of 2, but of 3. So if you're turning one card into 2 stats, even if it's a permanent stat, I don't think it's good enough. Nighthawk, 4-cost defender affiliated, 3/3/1 with flight. His stats are garbage on turn 4, just not good enough. Mobilize the team. Build phase. You pay yellow, and you pay 4 less to recruit your next defender this turn. On other players' turns, he gets +3/+3. So he's a 4-drop who's a 6/6 when defending, and he lets you potentially ramp some stuff out. Just doesn't seem good enough. I've never felt like this is what I wanted to do with my turn 4. Maybe you play him and pay yellow, and then you underdrop some guy for free. But I think most of the time you play him, you want him to survive for a turn, and then on turn 5 you want to drop like your 7-drop, and that doesn't even take full advantage of the discount that he's offering. I just don't think this card is good enough. I think the soft ramp, the wealthy keyword, the Heralds of Galactus keyword, any soft ramp that gives you the ability to play something cheaper than it should cost, but it's got a hoop you have to jump through here. And it's very limited, and it's only once per activation of it. I don't think Nighthawk is good. Venom, 4/4/2. So the 4/4 on 4 is a little bit weak on the stats. He's a little bit below average, but what he's good at is he gets these +2 counters. So you pay a green and you get 2 green counters, and he has symbiosis, which means that he keeps those counters while he is stunned. That is great. I love being able to keep counters while I'm stunned. That's very cool. It definitely makes him more threatening as a character because you pay the green. Now he's a 6/6, which is fine. I mean, I'd like to see him be a little bit bigger on turn 4, but he's a 6/6. You hit somebody, even if you get hit back, you're still a 6/6 next turn. You can't put -1 counters on him while he's face down, so some of the methods that decks might have to shrink him back down are going to be closed off to them if symbiosis is mattering. It's just, I like Venom. I think he's a playable card. He's definitely playable in the Venom deck because that is a case where the +1 counter that you get from discarding Venom as a power-up is worth more than just the +1 counter because it's also worth experience. So while generally I would say paying 1 card for a stat adjustment of 2 is not good enough, there are times where there's a synergy that takes place where you get the stat adjustment of 2 stats, but you also get something else, like an experience point. Also, Venom, I think, is just a playable card. Not the best, but a playable card. 5-cost Bullseye, Underworld affiliated, 6/4/1 with range. Remove a +1 counter from Bullseye. If you do, wound a face-up supporting character. And that costs a red. So you have to get a +1 counter on him, and then you have to pay the stat buff plus another card in order to put a wound on a character that doesn't even stun him. So you can't use this power to clear an annoying blocker out of the way. You just get to put a wound on a guy. Now, some percent of the time, putting a wound on a guy will absolutely KO them. Because, again, many supporting characters, particularly in this era of the game, many of the supporting characters only have 1 health. But there's hoops you have to jump through to do this, and there isn't that much counter generation in just the Defender's box. Yes, there is the Underworld plot twist fair and balanced. Yes, there are Bullseye power-ups. But is this what we want to do on our turn 5? We want to put a counter on Bullseye that we then remove and have to pay a red just to stun a guy? How big was that guy? Can I not stun him with my 6 range attack? If I'm choosing between 5 drops in this box, Bullseye is probably not the one I'm going to pick. Punisher. This was for a long time one of the best 5 drops in the game. And still is quite good. So he's 7-3 with range, only 1 health, but he also has lethal and pay a red. If he's in a ranged combat, he can't be struck. You can use this on both the attack and the defense, which I guess answers my any combat question earlier, which really does beg the question. Oh, you know what? I know why this hidden weapons has the main phase power. It's so if you need the range to declare the attack, you can play this, then declare the attack. But if you want to use it as a middle of the combat pump, you also can. Yeah, okay. Got to the bottom of that there. Back to Punisher. This guy axes board removal. He has the ability to wipe guys out because of his lethal. He has the ability to not get cracked back. And you can play that on the defense. If I send a ranged attack into him, I can pay the red, or you can pay the red, and then your Punisher survives even though I committed an attacker who you're probably going to stun back, because 7 attack on turn 5 is pretty good. Punisher is absolutely a playable card, probably the best 5-drop in this set. Purple Man, 2/5/1, not great stats, but you pay yellow and exhaust an enemy supporting character and move it to your back row. When Purple Man gets stunned, you give that character back. So this guy was Serpent Crown before it was cool. I think there are specific matchups where stealing an opposing character could be really relevant. Like if you think your opponent is going to be playing Senator Kelly, having a Purple Man in your deck to steal their Senator Kelly away could be good. Stealing your opponent's high drop, like if you steal somebody's Fing Fang Foom and then use their Foom to defend Purple Man so you can't get your Foom back, that could be pretty good. But this is a narrowly useful card. I don't think you add yellows into your deck just for Purple Man, and I certainly hope you don't play Purple Man. In a way, it's kind of a win more card, because if you're behind and you use Purple Man to steal a character, unless your opponent doesn't have the ability to get through their own character, they're probably going to gun for Purple Man pretty hard. And then you spent 2 cards and a whole turn to shuffle a supporting character around the board a little bit, and that is not good enough. So I think if you're going to use Purple Man, you need to kind of have some setup. You need to set him up in a way that the brainwash power has some durability to it, and you don't just immediately lose whatever character you stole. Vision. I have talked about how I do not think Vision is a very good card in the past. He is a 5/5/2. Now those are decent stats for a 5-drop in this era. I don't think they are generally decent stats for a 5-drop, but interestingly, this is one of the cards that at the time it came out, he had pretty okay stats, and then they gave him abilities that make his stats even better, that really buff him up and make him a much better card. So you pay a blue, and you get to, if he's attacking, you get to double his attack and defense, and if he's defending, you pay a blue and he can't be struck or strike. So that can't strike part kind of sucks. Like, it'd be cool to be able to hit your opponent and not get hit back yourself, but I understand it. With 2 health and this decreased density power, he can be very sticky, and with the ability to become a 10/10, he can avoid getting hit back when he declares attacks, and 10/10 is actually pretty good. So Vision, provided you have some number of laboratories to spend to do these powers, is not a bad card. The problem is if you don't have the blues, he's not quite good enough. He's not terrible. He's not garbage tier. He's not useless without his blues, the way somebody like Purple Man is useless without his location to pay for his superpower. Vision is slightly better than that, but if I have the ability to just play Punisher, I think I'm just going to play Punisher. He's less expensive and does more things. While Vision, yes, has a higher top end in terms of stats, he doesn't have lethal. He is stickier. So there's some parity between these 2 5-drops in terms of what your deck is actually looking for. But I'm guessing the vast majority of cases, I would rather have Punisher in my deck than have a 10 attack guy that doesn't have lethal. Baron Mordo, 8/5/1 with range. Pay a blue, KO a stun supporting character. Probably not good enough. You stun somebody, like, do I want to play this guy and have to pay a blue, or do I just want to play Punisher and kill something dead? You know, I think Punisher, the 5-drop, kind of outclasses Baron Mordo, particularly because his stats don't do that much for me. He's okay, I guess. 8 attack on range is not bad. And there probably are going to be situations where you stun a supporting character and then paying the blue to KO them allows you to jump ahead in terms of board control. So this power is relevant, but it's not the kind of power I would want to build a deck around at all. Kingpin, 592. His stats are a little bit interesting, but that kind of feeds into what his power is. You pay a green, and if there are 2 or more underworld characters on your side, Kingpin becomes your main character, and your main character becomes a supporting character. This acts as a 2 health heal for, I guess, maybe a 1 health heal for your main character, because if your main character used up all their health, they'd be dead, and you wouldn't be able to use this power. So it kind of, in a time before there was good healing in the game for main characters, Kingpin could absolutely act as a heal, and at 5 attack is not the best, but 9 defense was definitely a relevant number. It's less relevant now than it used to be, but I think this card is certainly worth looking at if you're running an underworld deck where Kingpin isn't already your main character. The ability to force your opponent to go from dealing with, let's see, what are our level 2 underworld main character guys? 6 defense, 7 defense. Well, you can't use Kingpin. 6 defense, 6, 8, 7. So this does give you an upgrade on the defense and another hit point on your main character. Having to make sure the thing is, though, the situation I think where you want to do this is you're kind of taking a beating and you need to pseudo heal your main character. If you're taking a beating, are you gonna have 2 or more underworld characters on your side? And if you have to play this guy on 6 and then on 7 vomit out some underworld guys, now he only has 1 health. Do you want him to become your main character? There is use here, but there's so many ways that it can go wrong. I don't know if I can wholeheartedly agree that this guy is good. I have played him. I've used him in decks before, and I've found success with him, but that was back in like 2015 or 2016, and I'm not sure that he holds up against some of the stuff that's going on nowadays. Valkyrie, 562 with flight. You can recruit characters out of your KO pile for the turn by paying a yellow. Valkyrie has enabled a bunch of different combos over the years. This is a very good card, if a little bit narrow in use, but you don't have to think of her as just a combo enabler, as just, infinite widow machine gun stuff. She can just be a hand extender. So you play her on turn 6, yeah, she gets stunned, but then on turn 7, your hand isn't shaping up to be very good, but you can throw a yellow at her and recruit 7 recruit points worth of stuff out of your KO pile, so she can bail you out of a bad situation by letting you get cards onto the board without subtracting cards from your hand. So I think she's a good 6-drop all the way around, although in most use cases she is absolutely going to be a combo enabler. In the Battles Royale format, she is not going to be a combo enabler because there's no combos in this box that would let her power do some stupid infinite broken thing. But I do think just her ability to extend your hand and to basically give you a second hand of cards in your KO pile. If you have you play a Punisher and he dies on your opponent's turn 6, you play Valkyrie, and then on your turn 7 you get a Punisher plus, I don't know, Scarlet Witch. That'd be bad probably. Punisher plus a dagger or something. You get some value back out of your KO pile. You get to recruit the same card twice, again, without subtracting cards from your hand. That's good. And in Battles Royale, which I think is going to be a format that's going to really focus on fundamentals and sort of the basic management of resources and card efficiency, she's a card that gives you a bunch of card efficiency. And yeah, there's a cost, and you have to pay it every turn that you want to be able to recruit characters out of your KO pile. But I don't think this is something, you don't have to play her and get full value out of her power in order for her to be good at all. I think 562 with flight is probably okay for a 6-drop. Really, the 2 health helps a great deal. I said 851 was probably not good enough. Well, he's probably only going to get 1 attack. Valkyrie's probably going to get 2 attacks, plus she has this massive upside of being able to, if you just look at this guy, Mordo lets you pay 1 resource to remove 1 character from the game. Well, KO it, not remove from the game. Valkyrie lets you pay 1 resource to get potentially an infinite number of characters from the KO pile. If she lives for turn after turn and you can keep doing this, on turn 7, I play my Ghost Rider, you kill it, I recruit my Ghost Rider again. I think Valkyrie's very good. And I think she's better than the other 7-drop option, which has flight range, 7/5/1 War Machine. Did I say 7? 6-drop. War Machine is a 6-drop with 7/5/1 flight and range, and you pay 2 greens and KO a supporting character. That's an okay power. I think it's a little bit overcosted. It is better than KOing a face-down supporting character, so I understand why they couldn't make it a 1-cost power since you've got Baron Mordo over here with it. 7 attack at range, well, our 5-drop of choice in Defenders can already do that. Only 1 health, and it's expensive. Like, you can't play this in Luke Cage. If you're using your greens for other things, you can't play this guy. So, not a huge fan. I mean, in the right deck, he's not unplayably bad, but I think a lot of the time you're going to play this guy, and he's just going to be a 7-attack flight range attacker, and that is it, because these greens have got to go somewhere else. Blackheart absolutely gets hosed by any ability that removes KO piles from the game or removes characters from KO piles. He is a flight range 4/4/2. These are extremely poor stats on a 7-drop, but he gets +1/+1 for each evil character in your KO pile. So if you've built your deck around lots of little weenie guys that come out and die, you can play Blackheart and have him be a 10/10 or whatever. Yeah, he can get pretty nasty. This guy can be very difficult to deal with if he's allowed to grow. How often is he going to be allowed to grow? If you think your opponent is on Blackheart, there are some things you can do to kind of mitigate it. Now, within the Defender's box, there's not really anything. You can't pull your opponent's KO pile out of the game, but those cards do exist, and they absolutely hose your 7-drop. Do you want to play this guy as your 7-drop if you think your opponent might be able to slap a nullifier down or remove your KO pile from the game or shuffle your characters from your KO pile back into your deck, and then your 7-drop is the size of, let's see, don't we have a 3-drop who's a 4/4? Yeah, your 7-drop's the size of a 3-drop. Ooh! Ooh! In the right deck, he can be good. He can be playable. This is not a coaster level of a card, but the risks are real. There is a risk-reward trade-off with Blackheart. And finally, Ghost Rider, the 7-drop that ruled the format for some number of years. He is an 8/8/2. These are very good stats for 7-drop, and when he appears, you get to put -1 counters equal to the number of good characters in your KO pile on an enemy character. Not a supporting character, a character. So if you have been playing these little 1-drop guys who come out and die all game long, potentially on turn 7, you play your 7-drop and you get to put 6 -1 counters on an opposing main character, which, if we look at some of the main characters in this box, will outright stun those main characters, especially if they haven't leveled, like Daredevil. Ghost Rider is very good. He was very good at the time he was printed. I still think he's a good card, although you have to build your deck in such a way that there are going to be good characters in your KO pile. Otherwise, he's like just good. He's not very good. He's just good. Altogether, I think the Defender's box is worth your time. There are staple cards in here that you absolutely want to get. Unfortunately, some of the best cards for both of these teams, like Taskmaster and Jessica Jones, do not appear in this box. They appear in the Legacy expansion, so they won't be available to you for the Battles Royale format. I still think there's some fun things to look at here. I think the plot twist interaction that the Defender's box brings to the Battles Royale format cannot be ignored or understated. There are a few of the best plot twists in the game for what they do in this box. Now, where there's some real weakness is in these middle turns. I think both of these teams have some real stinker turns. The 3-cost slot is not super great for Underworld. It's not super great. The 2-cost slot is not super great for Underworld. And Defenders similarly has some pretty anemic mid-game turns here. Like turn 4 for Defenders sucks. There's nothing here that I want to play for Defenders on turn 4. So that was our set review of the Defenders box, and